The mud at Waystone Cross had swallowed half a dozen coins that morning, and Stefan Vance figured his purse had joined them when he reached for it an hour down the road and found nothing but the frayed cord still looped to his belt. He reined in his mare and swore quietly, patting every pocket twice while the afternoon sun beat down on his shoulders. 3 weeks of wages gone. The silver he had been carrying between the logging camps and the regional counting house. The copper meant for his own lodging. Even the worn gold piece his father had given him before he died. All of it vanished somewhere in that crush of travelers and traders that morning when he had stopped to water his horse and buy a meat pie from the vendor with the crooked sign. Stefan turned his mare around without much hope and started back toward the crossroads. The chances of finding a lost purse in a place like Waystone were slim, and the chances of finding it intact were worse than slim. Still, he had to try. The paymaster would dock his future earnings if he showed up short, and Garrick Thorne was already looking for excuses to cut what he owed the riders. Every month it was something. Coins lost to bandits who never existed. Routes that paid less than promised because of market adjustments no one else had heard about. Wages held back for administrative fees that appeared on no official ledger. The crossroads came back into view as Stefan crested the low hill. Waystone Cross was barely a town, just a wide meeting of 4 roads with a stable, a tavern, a smithy, and a handful of shops that served travelers. A good place to lose something. A terrible place to find it again. He dismounted near the water trough where he had stopped that morning and began retracing his steps. The mud had dried in the afternoon heat, turned from sucking mire to cracked clay. He scanned the ground near the pie vendor, walked the perimeter of the stable yard, checked the hitching posts. Nothing. A few people watched him with mild curiosity, but no one offered help. Stefan was crouched near a wagon rut, fingers sifting through dry grass, when he heard boots squelching through a remaining patch of mud behind him. "You are the rider in the gray coat," a voice said. Female, low-pitched, careful with each word. He turned and looked up. The girl standing 3 paces away was an orc, green-skinned and lean, built like a runner with narrow shoulders and long limbs. Her tusks were small, barely protruding past her upper lip, and her dark hair was tied back in a practical braid. She wore a patched tunic and trousers that had seen better years, both too large for her frame. Her boots were splitting at the seams. In her hand, she held his purse. Stefan stood slowly, eyes fixed on the worn leather pouch. "That is mine," he said. "I know." She extended it toward him, her expression unreadable. "You dropped it near the trough this morning. I saw it fall when you mounted. I called after you, but you did not hear." He took the purse carefully, feeling its familiar weight. He loosened the drawstring and looked inside. Every coin was still there, including the gold piece. He looked back at the girl, who had already started to turn away. "Wait," Stefan said. She paused, glancing back over her shoulder. Up close, he could see how thin she was. Her cheekbones stood out sharp beneath her skin, and her tunic hung loose around her waist. "You have been carrying this all day?" he asked. "I did not know where you went," she said. "I waited, hoping you would come back. You could have kept it." Something flickered across her face, too quick to name. "It was not mine to keep." Stefan studied her a moment longer, then made his decision. The sun was already sinking toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. His stomach had been growling for the past hour, and hers probably had been growling longer. "Have you eaten today?" he asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. "The tavern here serves a decent stew," Stefan said. "Let me buy you supper. It is the least I can do." The girl looked at him like he had spoken in a foreign tongue. "You do not need to do that." I know I do not need to. I want to. You saved me from a miserable conversation with my paymaster and probably 3 months of docked wages. That is worth more than a bowl of stew. He secured his purse properly this time, tucking it inside his coat. I am Stefan, by the way, Stefan Vance. She was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing whether to trust him. Finally, she said, Nira Hale. Good to meet you, Nira. He gestured toward the tavern, a squat building with a faded sign that read The Weary Wheel. Come on. I am starving and you look like you could use a hot meal. Nira followed him across the yard, keeping a half step behind. Stefan could feel eyes tracking them as they walked. A human and an orc together drew attention anywhere, but especially at places like Waystone, where travelers from a dozen different regions mixed, and suspicions ran high. He ignored the stares and pushed open the tavern door. The common room was half full, mostly traders and drivers waiting out the hottest part of the day before continuing their journeys. The innkeeper, a heavy-set woman with gray, streaked hair, looked up from behind the bar. Her gaze moved from Stefan to Nira and back again, her expression cooling several degrees. Table for two, Stefan said pleasantly. The innkeeper jerked her chin toward the back corner, the furthest spot from the fire and the most shadowed part of the room. Stefan considered arguing, then decided it was not worth the effort. He led Nira to the corner table and pulled out a chair for her before taking the seat across. 2 bowls of stew, 2 ales, and bread if you have it, he called to the innkeeper. The woman grunted acknowledgement and disappeared into the kitchen. Nira sat stiffly in her chair, hands folded in her lap. She looked deeply uncomfortable, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. Relax, Stefan said. The stew here is actually good. The ale is tolerable. And the innkeeper will grumble, but she will serve us. You do this often? Nira asked. Eat with orcs. I eat with whoever I feel like eating with, Stefan said. And you did me a real kindness today. Returning a lost purse is one thing. Waiting around half the day to do it is something else. It was the right thing to do, Nira said quietly. The right thing is not always the thing people do, Stefan said. Believe me, I know. The innkeeper returned with 2 foaming mugs and thumped them down on the table with more force than necessary. Stefan thanked her and took a long drink. The ale was thin but cold, and it cut the dust in his throat. Nira wrapped her hands around her own mug but did not drink. She was still watching him with that cautious, unreadable expression. How long have you been at Waystone? Stefan asked. 3 weeks, Nira said. Maybe 4, I lost count. Looking for work, I found work. Hauling cargo at the stable, mucking stalls, whatever needs doing. It does not pay much. She paused. It does not pay regularly, Stefan grimaced. Let me guess. The stable master pays when he feels like it and always less than promised. You know him. I know the type. Stefan leaned back as the innkeeper returned with 2 bowls of thick brown stew and a half loaf of dark bread. The smell was rich and savory, heavy with herbs and chunks of root vegetables. Nira stared at her bowl like it might vanish if she looked away. Go ahead, Stefan said, pushing the bread toward her. Eat. Nira picked up her spoon slowly as if testing whether this was real. Then she took a bite, and something in her posture changed. She ate steadily after that, not rushed or frantic, but with the focused intensity of someone who had been hungry for a while. Stefan ate his own stew and watched her between bites. She was younger than he had first thought, probably not more than 20. Her hands, though calloused, were small and fine-boned. There was a fading bruise on her forearm, the greenish yellow of something a week or 2 old. Where are you from originally? He asked when she paused to tear off a piece of bread. North, Nira said. A settlement near the ironwood. It is not there anymore. Stefan waited, but she did not elaborate. He did not push. People ended up at places like Waystone for all kinds of reasons, and most of those reasons were nobody else's business. "What about you?" Nira asked, turning the question back on him. "You said you are a rider." "Courier," Stefan said. "I carry wages and messages between the logging camps, the mill towns, and the regional counting house. It is steady work, keeps me moving." "You like moving?" Stefan considered the question. "I like the work. The travel is just part of it. I am good with horses, good with people, and I am honest. That last part matters more than you would think in this job." "Your paymaster is not honest," Nira said. "It was not a question." "No," Stefan said. "He is not. Garrick Thorne has been skimming wages for years. He blames the shortages on bandits, on bad weather, on orcs stealing from supply wagons." He met her eyes. "He especially likes blaming orcs." Nira looked down at her stew. "People always do." "Not always," Stefan said. "Not everyone." They finished the meal in comfortable silence after that. Stefan ordered another round of bread and a second ale for himself. And by the time the sun had fully set outside the tavern windows, Nira looked less like a cornered animal and more like a person who had been given a moment to breathe. "Thank you," she said when Stefan finally settled the bill with the innkeeper. "For the meal." "Thank you for returning my purse," Stefan said. "And listen, if you need work that actually pays, come find me next time I am through Waystone. I am here at least once a week, sometimes more. I know people at most of the posts along the northern routes. I can ask around." Nira studied him for a long moment, and he had the sense that she was weighing his words carefully, testing them for sincerity. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded once. "I will remember that," she said. They parted outside the tavern. Stefan headed to the stable to retrieve his mare and secure lodging for the night, and Nira disappeared into the gathering dusk. He found himself hoping she had somewhere dry to sleep, but he suspected she did not. He thought about her on and off over the next week as he made his usual circuit. He delivered wages to a logging camp east of Waystone, picked up correspondence from a mill supervisor, and returned to the regional counting house in the town of Crestfall to reconcile accounts with Garrick Thorne. Thorne was a narrow-faced man in his 50s with thinning hair and clever eyes. He sat behind a wide desk in an office that smelled of ink and damp paper, tallying figures in a ledger while Stefan waited. "Wages delivered to the East Camp?" Thorne asked without looking up. "Yes." "The foreman signed for them. Any trouble on the road?" "None." Thorne made a note, flipped a page. "3 riders came back short last month, missing coins, all of them. I am tired of it." "Maybe you should hire better riders," Stefan said mildly. Thorne looked up, eyes sharp. "Or maybe I have been too lenient. I am implementing a new policy. Any rider who comes back short will have the missing amount docked from future pay, plus a penalty fee. No exceptions." Stefan kept his expression neutral. "Even if the shortage is not the rider's fault." "Then the rider should guard the wages better," Thorne said. "I am not running a charity. If you cannot protect what you are carrying, you are in the wrong profession." Stefan left the counting house with Thorne's words sitting sour in his gut. The new policy was one more way for the paymaster to squeeze coins from people who could not afford to lose them. It also gave Thorne an excuse to skim even more, since he could now claim any shortage was the rider's fault and dock them accordingly. He was still brooding over it when he reached Waystone Cross 3 days later. The place looked the same as always, dusty and busy, full of travelers and traders moving through. Stefan watered his mare at the trough and bought a meat pie from the vendor, and he was halfway through eating it when Nira appeared at his elbow. "You said to find you if I needed work," she said without preamble. Stefan turned, surprised. "I did. Are you looking?" "I am always looking," Nira said. The stable master decided he did not need me anymore. He said business was slow. Business is not slow, Stefan said. I just watched 6 wagons pull in this morning. I know. Stefan finished his pie and wiped his hands on his trousers. I meant what I said. I can ask around. It might take a few days, but I know people. Can I come with you? Nira asked. Stefan blinked. Come with me on your route, Nira said. You ride between posts. Someone must need help along the way. I can work. I am strong, I am fast, and I show up when I say I will. Stefan considered this. It was not a terrible idea. Most of the places he visited were desperate for reliable labor, and Nira had already proven she was honest. But traveling with an orc would draw even more attention than eating supper with one, and not all of it would be friendly. It could be rough, Stefan said. People will talk. Some will refuse to work with you just because of what you are. They already do that, Nira said. At least if I am traveling, I will see new places while they refuse. Stefan found himself smiling despite the circumstances. Fair point. All right, I have 3 stops to make this week. You can come along and we will see who is hiring, but I am not promising anything. I am not asking you to promise, Nira said. I am asking you to try. Then let's go. Nira did not have much to gather. She retrieved a small pack from behind the stable, slung it over one shoulder, and met Stefan at the hitching post 5 minutes later. He helped her up onto his mare's back, then swung up behind her. The horse shifted under the extra weight but did not complain. First stop is a mill town called Ashford, Stefan said. About 4 hours north. They process timber from the camps and ship it south. Always busy. Hold on. Nira gripped the front of the saddle as Stefan urged the mare into a steady trot. They left Waystone behind and followed the northern road into rolling hills covered in scrub grass and scattered stands of pine. The sun climbed higher, turning the morning cool into midday heat, and Stefan found himself acutely aware of Nira sitting in front of him. She smelled like wood smoke and soap, and she held herself carefully like she was trying not to lean back against him. You can relax, Stefan said after a while. You are not going to knock me off the horse. I have never ridden before, Nira admitted. Not like this. You are doing fine. Just move with her, not against her. They rode in silence for a stretch, the road unspooling beneath the mare's hooves. Stefan let his mind wander, cataloging the things he needed to do in Ashford. Drop off a packet of correspondence for the mill supervisor. Pick up a list of supply requests to bring back to the counting house. Check in with the local merchants and see if anyone had work for a day laborer. Why do you do this? Nira asked suddenly. Do what? Help me, Nira said. You do not know me. You have no reason to. Stefan thought about that. My father was a rider too. He used to say that the job was about more than just delivering packages. He said people trusted us with important things, and that trust only worked if we were the kind of people worth trusting. I guess I took that to heart. He paused. And you gave me back my purse when you could have kept it. That says something about you. It says I am not a thief, Nira said. It says you are honest even when being honest costs you, Stefan said. That is rare. Believe me. Nira did not reply, but her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she leaned back just a fraction. Stefan took it as a good sign. They reached Ashford just after midday. The town sat in a wide valley beside a fast-flowing river, its center dominated by the massive timber mill that gave the place its livelihood. The sound of sawing and hammering filled the air, along with the sharp scent of fresh-cut wood. Workers moved between stacks of lumber, loading wagons and checking inventory, their voices a constant hum of activity. Stefan dismounted first, then helped Nira down. A few of the workers glanced their way, but most were too busy to care. Stefan led the mare to a shaded hitching post and left her with a bucket of water, then headed toward the mill office with Nira following. The mill supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Thomas Reed, looked up from a work table covered in diagrams and shipping manifests as Stefan entered. "Vance," Thomas said, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Good to see you. You have the letters from Crestfall right here." Stefan pulled the packet from his saddlebag and handed it over. "Anything to send back, give me 10 minutes and I will have a list for you." Thomas glanced past Stefan to where Nira stood near the door. His smile faded slightly. "Who is your friend?" "Nira Hale," Stefan said. "She is looking for work. Thought I would ask around while I was here." Thomas scratched his jaw, considering. "What kind of work?" "Anything that needs doing," Nira said before Stefan could answer. "I can haul, sort, load wagons. I learn fast." Thomas looked her over, his expression neutral. "You ever worked a mill before?" "No," Nira said, "but I have worked lumber camps. I know how to handle timber." "We are always short on sorters," Thomas said slowly. "Pay is 2 silver a day plus a meal. Hours are dawn to dusk. Work is hard." He paused. "But I will be honest with you. Not everyone here is going to be happy about working alongside an orc. I can keep order in my mill, but I cannot control what people say." "I can handle what people say," Nira said. Thomas studied her a moment longer, then nodded. "All right, you want to start today?" "Yes." "Then go see Marcus at the sorting yard. Tell him I sent you." Thomas turned back to Stefan. "Give me a few minutes for that list." Stefan and Nira left the office together. The sorting yard was on the far side of the mill, a sprawling area where cut timber was separated by size and quality before being loaded for shipment. Marcus, the yard foreman, was a grizzled man with a limp and a perpetual scowl. He listened to Nira's explanation, looked her up and down, and pointed to a stack of beams that needed moving. "Start there," he said. "Let's see what you can do." Nira dropped her pack, rolled her shoulders, and got to work. Stefan watched for a few minutes, impressed despite himself. She moved efficiently, lifting beams that would have taken 2 men and carrying them to the sorting racks without apparent effort. Marcus watched too, his scowl softening into something closer to approval. "She will do," Marcus said to Stefan. "You vouching for her?" "I am," Stefan said. "Then she has a job. For now." Stefan collected his list from Thomas, checked in with a few of the local merchants, and spent the rest of the afternoon making his rounds. By the time he returned to the sorting yard, Nira was still working, her tunic soaked with sweat and her hands covered in wood dust. She looked exhausted but satisfied. "How did it go?" Stefan asked. "Good," Nira said. "Marcus said I can come back tomorrow if I want." "Do you want?" Nira looked back at the mill, then at Stefan. "I do, but you are leaving tomorrow, are you not?" "I am," Stefan said. "But I will be back through Ashford in about a week. You can stay here, work the mill, and I will check in with you then. If it is not working out, we will figure out something else." Nira nodded slowly. "All right." Stefan helped her arrange lodging at a boarding house near the mill, a plain but clean place that catered to itinerant workers. He paid for 3 nights upfront, ignoring Nira's protests. "You can pay me back once you have earned a few days' wages," he said. "Consider it an investment." They ate supper together at a cookhouse near the boarding house, a simple meal of fried fish and boiled potatoes. The conversation was easier this time, less cautious. Nira asked about the other towns on Stefan's route, and he described them as best he could, painting pictures of the people and places she might see if she kept traveling with him. "Why do you keep moving?" Nira asked at one point. "Do you like it, or is it just the job?" Stefan considered the question. "Both, I suppose. I like meeting people. I like seeing new places, even if most of them are just small towns that look like every other small town. But mostly, I like knowing that what I do matters. People rely on the mail, on their wages arriving on time." I am part of that. What would you do if you were not a rider? Nira asked. Stefan laughed. I have no idea. This is all I have ever done. My father trained me and I took over his routes when he died. It never occurred to me to do anything else. Do you ever want to stop moving? Nira asked. Settle somewhere, maybe someday, Stefan said. If I found the right reason to. Nira looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her dark eyes, then looked away. I should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Stefan walked her back to the boarding house and said good night. He found his own lodging at the mill's bunkhouse, a rough space reserved for drivers and riders passing through. He lay awake for a while that night, thinking about Nira and the way she had looked at him over supper. There had been something in her gaze, something that made his chest feel strange and warm. He told himself he was imagining things. They barely knew each other. She was just grateful for the help, and he was just glad to have done a good deed. That was all. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her face, and when he drifted off to sleep, he dreamed of green skin and small tusks and eyes that watched him like he was something worth remembering. Stefan left Ashford early the next morning, before Nira reported to the mill. He told himself it was because he had a schedule to keep, but part of him knew he was avoiding a goodbye that might feel more complicated than it should. He had 2 more stops to make before returning to Crestfall, and both went smoothly. He delivered messages, picked up correspondence, and made his usual notes about road conditions and potential delays. When he reported back to Garrick Thorne at the counting house, the paymaster was in a foul mood. Another rider came back short, Thorne said, practically spitting the words. Claimed he was robbed on the road between Millstone and Crestfall. No witnesses, no proof, just his word. Did you believe him? Stefan asked. Does it matter? Thorne said. I still have to account for the missing wages. I am docking his pay and I am putting a note in his file. If it happens again, he is done. Stefan kept his expression neutral, but inwardly he was tallying numbers. Too many riders were coming back short and all of them were getting blamed. Either Thorne was hiring incompetence or something else was going on. Stefan had his suspicions about which it was. Anything else? Stefan asked. Yes, Thorne said. I need you to make an extra run to Waystone tomorrow. There is a payroll that needs to go out to the camp near Oak Ridge, and I do not trust anyone else with it after last week. I just came from that direction, Stefan said. Could have taken it with me. The payroll was not ready, Thorne said impatiently. It is ready now. Can you do it or not? I can do it. Good, pick it up here at dawn. Stefan left the counting house and spent the evening at a tavern in Crestfall, nursing a mug of ale and thinking. The more he worked for Thorne, the less he trusted the man. The docked wages, the missing coins, the convenient delays, it all added up to a pattern, and that pattern smelled like fraud. But proving it would be difficult. Thorne kept the ledgers, Thorne reconciled the accounts, and Thorne had been in his position for over a decade. He had the trust of the regional authorities, and Stefan was just a courier. Who would believe him if he spoke up? He thought about Nira and the way she had handed back his purse without hesitation. Honesty as a rare currency. Maybe it was time to start spending some of his own. Stefan picked up the payroll at dawn the next morning and rode west toward Waystone. The route was familiar by now, the road a ribbon of pale dirt winding through hills and sparse forest. He made good time and reached Waystone just after midday. He delivered the payroll to the camp foreman near Oak Ridge, collected a receipt, and turned back toward Waystone Cross to water his horse and grab a meal before heading back to Crestfall. He was halfway through a bowl of stew at the weary wheel when a figure dropped into the chair across from him. You came back, Nira said. Stefan looked up, surprised. I thought you were in Ashford. I was, Nira said. The mill supervisor had business here today, and I rode along on one of his wagons. He is heading back tomorrow, and I will go with him." She paused. "I have been looking for you." "Looking for me? I wanted to thank you again," Nira said. "For helping me find work. It has been good. The pay is fair, and Marcus does not care that I am an orc as long as I do the job." "I am glad," Stefan said, and he meant it. "You earned it. I just pointed you in the right direction." Nira leaned forward, her expression serious. "I heard something today, at the camp near Oakridge. Some of the workers were talking about missing wages. They said the paymaster in Crestfall is blaming it on thieves, but no one has actually seen any thieves." Stefan set down his spoon. "What else did they say?" "They said it has been happening for months, maybe longer. Always small amounts, just enough to go unnoticed, but it adds up." Nira hesitated. "They said the paymaster blames orcs when he can, makes it easier to explain the shortages." Stefan felt a cold anger settling in his chest. "That sounds like Garrick Thorne. Is that your paymaster?" "Yes." Nira watched him carefully. "You already suspected this." "I did," Stefan admitted. "But suspecting is not the same as proving. Thorne keeps the books. He controls the records. If I accuse him without evidence, he will just deny it and make my life difficult." "What if you had evidence?" Nira asked. "What kind of evidence?" Nira reached into her tunic and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She smoothed it on the table between them. "One of the workers at the camp gave this to me. He said he has been keeping his own records of what he was owed versus what he was paid. The numbers do not match." Stefan picked up the paper and scanned it. The writing was rough but legible, a list of dates and amounts that showed a clear pattern of underpayment. It was not definitive proof, but it was a start. "Why did he give this to you?" Stefan asked. "Because I told him I knew an honest courier," Nira said. "I told him you might be able to help." Stefan looked at her, at the earnestness in her face and the trust in her eyes, and he felt something shift inside him. This was not just about proving Thorne was a fraud. This was about standing up for people who had no voice, people like Nira who were blamed for things they did not do. It was about honesty, the kind his father had taught him, the kind that mattered even when it was hard. "I need more than this," Stefan said. "I need testimony from multiple people, records that show the pattern clearly, and I need to compare it against Thorne's official ledgers." "How do you do that?" Nira asked. Stefan thought for a moment. "I will need help, people I trust, and I will need to be careful. If Thorne finds out what I am doing, he will shut it down fast." "I can help," Nira said immediately. "You have a job now," Stefan said. "You do not need to risk it." "You risked buying me supper when you did not have to," Nira said. "You risked helping me find work. Let me help you with this." Stefan studied her, weighing the risks. Then he nodded. "All right, but we do this carefully. No rushing, no mistakes. Agreed." "Agreed." They spent the next hour planning. Stefan would continue his normal routes, but he would start asking quiet questions at each stop. How much were people owed? How much did they actually receive? Were there discrepancies? Nira would do the same at the mill in Ashford and any other place she visited. They would gather records, testimonies, anything that could be used to build a case against Thorne. "It is going to take time," Stefan warned. "Weeks, maybe months." "I have time," Nira said. They parted ways again that afternoon, but this time Stefan did not feel like he was saying goodbye. He felt like he was saying see you soon, and that was different. As he rode back toward Crestfall, he found himself thinking about Nira more than he probably should. The way she had looked at him across the table, the way she had offered to help without hesitation. She was brave, he realized. Not just strong or honest, but genuinely brave. Over the next month, Stefan and Nira fell into a rhythm. Stefan made his usual rounds, delivering wages and messages, but now he also asked questions and took notes. He spoke to workers at logging camps, mill hands, stable boys, anyone who received pay through Garrick Thorne's counting house. Most of them had stories about missing coins, short wages, unexplained deductions. Stefan wrote everything down, cross-referencing dates and amounts. Nira did the same at the mill in Ashford and at the stops along Stefan's route where she accompanied him. She had a way of getting people to talk, a quiet directness that inspired trust. Workers who might have been suspicious of a human courier were willing to open up to her, and she collected testimonies that Stefan never could have gathered on his own. They met whenever their schedules aligned, usually at Waystone Cross or Ashford, and they shared their findings over meals at taverns or cookhouses. The evidence mounted slowly but steadily. Pattern after pattern emerged, all pointing to the same conclusion. Garrick Thorne was skimming wages, pocketing the difference and blaming the shortages on theft or banditry. But Stefan still needed access to Thorne's official ledgers to prove it definitively. Without those, he had testimony and personal records, but no way to show that the paymaster's books did not match reality. "How do you get to the ledgers?" Nira asked one evening as they sat in a quiet corner of the weary wheel. "I do not know yet," Stefan admitted. "Thorne keeps them locked in his office, and he is the only one with a key. I would need a reason to be in there when he is not." "Could you create a reason?" Nira asked. Stefan considered this. "Maybe, if I timed it right." Thorne leaves his office for an hour every afternoon to meet with the regional magistrate. If I could get into the office during that time, I might have long enough to copy the relevant pages. "That is risky," Nira said. "I know. But you are going to do it anyway." Stefan looked at her. "I have to. We have testimony, but testimony can be dismissed. Numbers do not lie. If I can show that Thorne's ledgers do not match what he actually paid out, the magistrate will have to act." Nira reached across the table and rested her hand on his. Her palm was warm and calloused, strong from weeks of mill work. "Then I will help you." "You do not have to," Stefan said. "I know," Nira said, "but I want to." Stefan turned his hand over and squeezed hers gently. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection that felt deeper than friendship but not yet named. He did not let go right away, and neither did she. They planned the operation for the following week. Stefan would make an excuse to return to Crestfall mid-route, claiming he needed to clarify some instructions from Thorne. He would arrive just before the paymaster left for his afternoon meeting, wait until the office was empty, and then slip inside to copy the ledger pages. Nira would keep watch outside, ready to warn him if Thorne returned early. The day arrived cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that threatened rain. Stefan rode into Crestfall with his heart pounding and his mind racing through everything that could go wrong. He tied his mare outside the counting house and waited, watching through the window until he saw Thorne gather his coat and leave the building. Stefan counted to 20, then nodded to Nira, who was standing near the corner of the building. She nodded back, and he slipped inside. The counting house was silent, the only sound the ticking of a clock on the wall. Stefan moved quickly to Thorne's office and tried the door. Locked, as expected. He pulled a thin metal pick from his pocket, a tool his father had taught him to use years ago for emergencies, and worked the lock until it clicked open. The office was neat and ordered, the desk covered in papers and ledgers arranged in precise stacks. Stefan found the main wage ledger in the top drawer and opened it carefully. He pulled out a notebook and began copying the entries, focusing on the months where he had the most testimony. The numbers were damning. The amounts recorded as paid out were consistently higher than what workers had actually received, sometimes by as much as 10%. Stefan was halfway through the second page when he heard footsteps in the hall outside. His blood went cold. He glanced at the window, saw Nira gesturing frantically. Thorne was coming back. Stefan closed the ledger, shoved it back in the drawer, and moved toward the door. He could hear Thorne's voice now, talking to someone. He had seconds, maybe less. He slipped out of the office, pulled the door shut behind him, and walked quickly toward the main entrance. He passed Thorne in the hallway, nodded politely, and kept moving. "Vance," Thorne said sharply. "What are you doing here?" Stefan turned, forcing his expression to remain calm. "I had a question about the payroll for next week. I thought I would stop by while I was in town." Thorne frowned. "You could have sent a message." "I was already here," Stefan said. "But you are busy. I will come back later." He left before Thorne could ask more questions, his heart still racing. Nira was waiting outside, her face tense. "That was close," she said quietly as they walked away from the counting house. "Too close," Stefan agreed, "but I got what I needed." He showed her the copied pages that evening at a tavern across town. Nira studied the numbers, her expression growing darker as she read. "This is enough," she said finally. "This proves he has been lying." "It is enough for me," Stefan said, "but I need to present it to someone who can actually do something about it. The regional magistrate, probably. And I need to do it in a way that Thorne cannot dismiss or bury." "When?" Nira asked. "Soon," Stefan said, "before he realizes what I am doing." They spent the next few days preparing. Stefan compiled all the testimony he and Nira had gathered, organized the copied ledger pages, and wrote a formal complaint detailing Thorne's fraud. He also reached out to a few of the workers who had been most vocal about the wage discrepancies, asking if they would be willing to testify in person if needed. Most agreed. The magistrate in Crestfall was a stern woman named Lydia Cross, known for her fairness and her low tolerance for corruption. Stefan requested a meeting with her, claiming he had information about irregularities in the regional payroll. She agreed to see him the following afternoon. Stefan brought Nira with him. She was nervous, he could tell, but she held herself with quiet dignity as they were shown into the magistrate's office. Lydia Cross was a tall woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened without interrupting as Stefan laid out his case, presenting the testimony, the copied ledger pages, and his own observations. When he finished, the magistrate leaned back in her chair and studied the documents. "These are serious accusations," she said finally. "If what you are saying is true, Garrick Thorne has been defrauding workers and blaming it on theft. That is a criminal offense." "I know," Stefan said. "That is why I brought it to you." Lydia looked at Nira. "You were involved in gathering this evidence." "I was," Nira said. "I spoke to workers who were afraid to speak up on their own. They trusted me because I am like them, nobody important." "You are important enough to be here," Lydia said. "That counts for something." She turned back to Stefan. "I will need to verify these ledger entries against the official records. If they match what you have shown me, I will open a formal investigation. Thorne will be suspended pending the outcome." "What if he tries to alter the records?" Stefan asked. "He will not have the chance," Lydia said. "I will have the ledgers seized today." True to her word, the magistrate acted swiftly. By that evening, a pair of guards had entered the counting house and confiscated Thorne's ledgers over his furious protests. The paymaster was placed on immediate suspension, barred from his office while the investigation proceeded. Stefan heard about it secondhand from another courier, and the news filled him with a grim satisfaction. It was not over yet, but it was a start. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, Stefan continued his routes, but the atmosphere at the counting house was tense. Thorne had hired a lawyer and was fighting the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. The ledgers matched Stefan's copies exactly, and the testimony from dozens of workers painted a clear picture of systematic fraud. Nira stayed close during those weeks, traveling with Stefan when she could and working at the mill when she could not. They talked more than they had before, about everything and nothing. Stefan learned that she had lost her family in a raid 2 years ago, that she had been wandering ever since, looking for a place where she could belong. Nira learned that Stefan had grown up on the road with his father, that he had never really had a home beyond the routes he traveled. "You ever think about stopping?" Nira asked one evening as they sat by a campfire along the road between Ashford and Waystone. "I used to think I would ride until I was too old to sit a horse," Stefan said. "But lately I have been thinking maybe I want something different." "Like what?" Stefan poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks rise into the night sky. "I do not know. A place to settle, maybe. Somewhere I could do work that matters without always moving." "You could run a post," Nira said. "You know the routes, you know the people, you would be good at it." Stefan looked at her. "What about you? What do you want?" Nira was quiet for a long moment. "I want to stop being invisible," she said finally. "I want to be somewhere people see me as a person, not just an orc. I want to matter." "You matter," Stefan said. "To who?" Stefan met her eyes across the fire. "To me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Nira looked away first, but not before Stefan saw the emotion in her face. "You barely know me," she said quietly. "I know enough," Stefan said. "I know you are honest and brave. I know you care about doing the right thing, even when it is hard. I know I like being around you." He paused. "I know I have feelings for you, Nira. I have had them for a while now." Nira looked back at him, her eyes wide. "Stefan." "You do not have to say anything," Stefan said quickly. "I just wanted you to know." "I do have something to say," Nira said. She stood and walked around the fire, sitting down beside him. "I have feelings for you too. I have had them since the night you bought me supper. I just did not think someone like you would ever see someone like me that way." "Someone like me," Stefan said. "I am just a courier." "You are kind," Nira said. "You are fair. You help people even when there is nothing in it for you. That is not just. That is rare." Stefan reached for her hand and she let him take it. They sat together by the fire, fingers intertwined, and for the first time in years, Stefan felt like he had found something worth staying for. The magistrate's ruling came down 2 weeks later. Garrick Thorne was found guilty of embezzlement and fraud. He was stripped of his position, fined heavily, and sentenced to 5 years of labor service. The workers he had defrauded were to be repaid from his personal assets, and the regional authorities issued a formal apology. Stefan was called to the magistrate's office the day after the ruling. He expected to be thanked, maybe commended for his role in uncovering the fraud. What he did not expect was what Lydia Cross said next. "The regional postmaster position in Crestfall is vacant," she said. "Thorne held it alongside his role as paymaster, and obviously he cannot continue. The position needs to be filled and I would like to offer it to you." Stefan stared at her. "Me? You know the routes," Lydia said. "You know the people. You have proven yourself to be honest and capable. The pay is steady and you would have a permanent office here in Crestfall. You would oversee the couriers, manage the payroll, and ensure everything runs cleanly." "I am a rider," Stefan said. "I have always been a rider." "You can still ride if you want," Lydia said, "but you would also have the option to stay in one place, to build something lasting." She paused. "Think about it. You do not have to decide today." Stefan left the magistrate's office in a daze. The offer was generous, more than he had ever imagined. But it also meant giving up the life he had known, the constant movement that had defined him for so long. He found Nira at the mill in Ashford that evening and told her about the offer. She listened quietly, her expression unreadable. "What are you going to do?" she asked when he finished. "I do not know," Stefan said. "Part of me wants to take it. It is a good opportunity and it would mean I could finally stop moving, but part of me worries that I will miss the road, that I will feel trapped." "What does your gut tell you?" Nira asked. Stefan thought about it. "My gut says I am ready to stop running. I am ready to have a home." "Then take the job," Nira said. "It is not that simple," Stefan said. "If I take the job, I will be in Crestfall all the time. You are here in Ashford. We will barely see each other." Nira looked at him for a long moment, then said, "What if I came with you?" Stefan's heart skipped. "To Crestfall? Why not?" Nira said. "You said the job includes managing payroll and overseeing couriers. That sounds like work that needs more than one person. You could hire me." "You want to work with me? I want to be with you," Nira said. "If that means working with you too, I am fine with that." Stefan reached for her hands, holding them tightly. "Are you sure? You have a good job here. You do not have to give it up for me." "I am not giving it up for you," Nira said. "I am giving it up for us. There is a difference." Stefan pulled her into a hug, holding her close. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucked under his chin. "I love you," he said quietly. Nira pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I love you too." They kissed then, a long, slow kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So we are doing this?" Stefan asked. "We are doing this," Nira said. Stefan accepted the postmaster position the next day. He and Nira moved to Crestfall the following week, renting a small house near the counting house that would serve as both their home and their office. The regional authorities approved Nira's hiring without question, especially after Lydia Cross vouched for her role in uncovering Thorne's fraud. The work was different from what Stefan was used to, but he found he liked it. He managed the couriers, planned the routes, and ensured that wages were delivered accurately and on time. Nira handled the ledgers and the correspondence, her sharp eye for detail catching mistakes before they became problems. Together, they built a system that was efficient, transparent, and honest. The people of Crestfall were wary of Nira at first, but she won them over quickly with her competence and her straightforward manner. Within a few months, she was as much a fixture of the counting house as Stefan was. They worked side by side every day, and in the evenings they walked home together, talking about everything and nothing. Life settled into a rhythm that felt right, steady, and solid in a way Stefan had never known before. One evening, about 6 months after they had moved to Crestfall, Stefan was working late in the office, reconciling the monthly accounts. Nira was at the desk across from him, copying out pay receipts. The lamp between them cast a warm circle of light, and the only sounds were the scratch of pens and the occasional crackle of the fire in the hearth. Stefan looked up from his ledger and watched Nira work. She was frowning slightly, her tongue poking out between her tusks the way it always did when she concentrated. He loved that expression. He loved everything about her. "Nira," he said. She looked up. "Yes." Stefan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. He had been carrying it for a week, waiting for the right moment. He realized now that there was no perfect moment, that every moment with her was the right one. He opened the box, revealing a simple silver ring with a small green stone set in the center. "I know we have only been together a short time," he said, "but I also know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Nira stared at the ring, her eyes wide. Then she looked at Stefan, and her face broke into the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Stefan slipped the ring onto her finger and she stood and came around the desk to kiss him. It was a kiss full of promise and joy, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were laughing. "I was so nervous," Stefan admitted. "I was afraid you would say no." "Why would I say no?" Nira asked. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me," Stefan said. "I mean it." They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the magistrate's office. Lydia Cross officiated, and a handful of friends from the counting house and the mill attended. It was not a grand affair, but it was perfect. Nira wore a dress of dark green that matched her skin, and Stefan wore his best coat. They exchanged vows in front of the people who mattered most, promising to stand by each other no matter what. After the ceremony, they hosted a small celebration at a tavern in Crestfall. The food was simple but good, and the company was warm. Stefan looked around the room at the people who had come to celebrate with them, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had spent so many years moving from place to place, never staying long enough to build connections. Now he had a home, a partner, and a community. He had everything he had never known he wanted. That night, as he and Nira walked home under a sky full of stars, she leaned her head on his shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Happy?" Stefan asked. "Very," Nira said. "Are you?" "More than I can say," Stefan replied. They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when they reached their house, Stefan unlocked the door and carried Nira over the threshold, making her laugh. Inside, the fire was banked low, and the room smelled of wood smoke and lavender. It was a small house, modest and unassuming, but it was theirs. Over the next few years, their life together deepened and grew. The counting house thrived under their management, and the regional authorities praised them repeatedly for their efficiency and integrity. Stefan trained new couriers, passing on the lessons his father had taught him about honesty and trust. Nira expanded her role, taking on additional responsibilities and earning the respect of everyone she worked with. They faced challenges, of course. There were still people who disapproved of their marriage, who muttered about humans and orcs not belonging together. But those voices grew quieter over time, drowned out by the evidence of their partnership and the good work they did. 2 years after their wedding, Nira told Stefan she was pregnant. He was overjoyed and also terrified. They spent months preparing, reading every book they could find about childbirth and parenting. When their daughter was born on a warm summer evening, Stefan held her in his arms and felt his heart swell with love so intense it hurt. They named her Lyra, after the constellation that had been visible the night they first kissed. She had her mother's green skin and her father's brown eyes, and from the moment she arrived, she was the center of their world. Lyra grew up in the counting house, toddling between desks and playing with scraps of paper while her parents worked. She was curious and bright, asking endless questions about numbers and letters and why the sky was blue. Stefan and Nira answered every question patiently, teaching her to read and write and think for herself. When Lyra was 3, they had a son whom they named Evan. He was quieter than his sister, more thoughtful, but just as loved. The house that had once felt too big for 2 people now felt perfectly sized for 4. Stefan found that fatherhood suited him. He loved teaching his children, loved watching them grow and discover the world. He loved the way Lyra ran to greet him when he came home from the counting house, and the way Evan fell asleep on his chest during story time. He loved the family he and Nira had built together, the life they had created from honesty and trust. One evening, when Lyra was 5 and Evan was 2, the family sat together at the dinner table. Nira had cooked a stew, rich and savory, and Stefan had brought home fresh bread from the baker. The children chattered happily, telling stories about their day, and Stefan and Nira exchanged smiles over their heads. After dinner, Stefan helped Nira clean up while the children played in the sitting room. As he dried the dishes, He thought about how far they had come since that day at Waystone Cross when Nira had returned his purse. It felt like a lifetime ago and also like yesterday. "What are you thinking about?" Nira asked, noticing his expression. "Just how lucky I am," Stefan said. "How lucky we are." Nira smiled and kissed him on the cheek. "We made our own luck," she said. "By being honest, by trusting each other, that is what matters." "You are right," Stefan said. "As always." Nira laughed and swatted him with the towel. "Do not get used to saying that." Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Stefan and Nira sat together by the fire. Nira was mending a tear in Evan's shirt, and Stefan was reviewing the next week's courier schedule. It was a peaceful moment, ordinary and unremarkable, and yet it felt precious. "Do you ever miss the road?" Nira asked suddenly. Stefan looked up from his schedule. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I miss the freedom of it, the feeling of always moving toward something new, but I do not miss not having a home. I do not miss being alone." "You are not alone anymore," Nira said. "No," Stefan said. "I am not, and that is worth more than any amount of freedom." Nira set down her mending and moved to sit beside him on the sofa. She rested her head on his shoulder and he wrapped an arm around her. "I love you," she said quietly. "I love you too," Stefan replied. They sat together in the firelight, content and complete. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters and sending leaves skittering across the cobblestones. Inside, the house was warm and safe, filled with the quiet sounds of a family at rest. Stefan thought about the journey that had brought them here, about the lost purse and the shared meal and the slow building of trust. He thought about Garrick Thorne and the fraud they had uncovered, about the risks they had taken and the honesty that had guided them. He thought about the life they had built together, the children they were raising, the future that stretched out before them. It had all started with a simple act of honesty, a returned purse that could have been kept. That one choice had led to everything else, to love and partnership and family. Stefan understood now what his father had meant when he said that trust only worked if you were the kind of person worth trusting. Nira had been that person from the very beginning, and Stefan had tried to be that person in return. The years continued to unfold with a gentle, steady rhythm. Lyra grew into a bright and confident girl who loved numbers almost as much as her mother did. She would sit at Nira's desk for hours, copying figures and asking questions about how the accounts balanced. Nira taught her patiently, showing her the tricks for spotting errors and the importance of keeping records clean. Evan, meanwhile, took after his father. He loved hearing stories about the couriers and their routes, and he begged Stefan to teach him how to ride. On his 6th birthday, Stefan bought him a small pony, and father and son spent countless hours together in the pasture behind the house, practicing starts and stops and turns. The counting house continued to prosper under Stefan and Nira's management. They hired additional staff as the workload grew, always choosing people who shared their values of honesty and fairness. The reputation of the Crestfall Post spread throughout the region, and other towns began requesting advice on how to set up their own systems. Stefan and Nira were invited to speak at a regional assembly of postmasters and magistrates when Lyra was 7. They stood together on a platform in front of dozens of officials, explaining how transparency and trust could transform a corrupt system into an honest one. Stefan talked about the importance of verification and oversight. Nira talked about listening to workers and taking their concerns seriously. The audience listened intently, and afterwards, several magistrates approached them with questions and requests for assistance. Stefan and Nira spent the rest of the day consulting with officials, sharing their methods and encouraging others to adopt similar practices. On the ride home, Nira was quiet, staring out at the passing landscape. "What are you thinking?" Stefan asked. "I was thinking about how different my life is now," Nira said. "A few years ago I was alone and hungry, doing whatever work I could find. Now I am standing in front of magistrates giving advice. It feels surreal." "You earned it," Stefan said. "You worked hard and you proved yourself." "People respect you because you are good at what you do." "People respect us," Nira corrected. "We did this together." Stefan reached over and took her hand. "Yes, we did." When Lyra was 9 and Evan was 6, Stefan began taking Evan on short courier runs, teaching him the routes and introducing him to the people along the way. Evan loved it, soaking up every detail and asking a million questions. Stefan saw himself in his son, the same curiosity and love for the work, and it filled him with pride. Lyra, meanwhile, announced that she wanted to learn bookkeeping properly, not just as a hobby but as a trade. Nira arranged for her to apprentice with the regional accountant, a stern but fair man who recognized Lyra's talent immediately. The children grew, and so did the family's place in the community. Stefan was elected to the town council, where he advocated for fair wages and better conditions for workers. Nira joined the Regional Merchants Guild, using her position to push for transparency in trade practices. Together, they became pillars of Crestfall, known and respected by everyone. But despite their success, they never forgot where they had come from. Every year on the anniversary of the day they met, Stefan and Nira returned to Waystone Cross. They would walk through the crossroads, visit the weary wheel, and share a meal at the same corner table where they had first talked. On their 10th anniversary, they brought Lyra and Evan with them. The children were fascinated by the story of how their parents had met, and they listened raptly as Stefan described finding his purse missing, and Nira explained how she had chased him down to return it. "So you fell in love because of a purse?" Lyra asked, wrinkling her nose. "We fell in love because your mother is honest and brave," Stefan said. "The purse was just the beginning." "And because your father is kind and fair," Nira added. "He saw me as a person, not just an orc. That mattered." Evan looked between his parents, his young face serious. "Are people still mean to you because you are an orc, Mama?" Nira considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," she said, "but much less than before, and when they are mean, your father and I stand together and that makes it easier." "I will stand with you too," Evan declared. "If anyone is mean to you, I will tell them to stop." Nira smiled and ruffled his hair. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." They finished their meal and walked through Waystone as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Stefan pointed out the water trough where he had watered his horse that long-ago day, and Nira showed the children where she had waited with the purse, hoping he would return. "It was the best decision I ever made," Nira said, looking at Stefan. "Waiting for you." "It was the best decision I ever made, inviting you to share the evening meal," Stefan replied. They held hands as they walked back to their wagon, the children running ahead, and Stefan felt a deep contentment settle over him. This was his life now. Not the endless road, not the solitary journey, but this family, community, purpose. It was everything he had never known he wanted, and everything he would never take for granted. The years continued to pass, marked by small joys and occasional challenges. Lyra finished her apprenticeship and began working as an accountant in Crestfall, quickly earning a reputation for her sharp eye and meticulous work. Evan, true to his passion, became a courier like his father, taking over several of Stefan's old routes. Stefan and Nira gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the counting house, training younger staff to take over. They remained as advisors and overseers, but the day-to-day management passed to others. It was strange at first, having more free time, but they found ways to fill it. Stefan taught writing lessons to children in the town. Nira volunteered at the local school, helping young students learn arithmetic. They also traveled more, visiting the towns and villages along the routes Stefan had once ridden. They were welcomed everywhere they went, often asked to share their story or offer advice. Stefan always emphasized the importance of honesty, and Nira always talked about the power of seeing people for who they truly were, not for what they looked like. On their 20th wedding anniversary, their friends and colleagues threw them a celebration at the town hall. The room was packed with people whose lives they had touched over the years: couriers, workers, merchants, magistrates. Lydia Cross, now retired but still sharp as ever, gave a speech praising their integrity and their impact on the region. Stefan and Nira stood together at the front of the room, hands clasped, and listened as person after person stood to share stories about how the couple had helped them. A former courier talked about how Stefan had fought to get him fair wages when he had been cheated. A mill worker described how Nira had listened to her concerns and helped her get better working conditions. A young orc man spoke about how seeing Nira succeed had given him hope that he could build a life for himself too. When it was Stefan's turn to speak, he kept it brief. "I learned from my father that this job is about more than just delivering packages," he said. "It is about trust. It is about being the kind of person people can rely on. Nira taught me that honesty is not just about telling the truth. It is about doing the right thing, even when it costs you. Together, we have tried to build a life based on those principles. Thank you for being part of that life." Nira spoke next, her voice steady and clear. 20 years ago, I was a stranger in a strange place trying to survive. Stefan saw me, truly saw me, and he gave me a chance. That chance changed everything. It gave me a home, a family, a purpose. I hope that in some small way, we have given others the same opportunity. Thank you for welcoming me, for trusting me, and for letting me be part of this community. The room erupted in applause, and Stefan and Nira held each other tightly, overwhelmed by the love and support surrounding them. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and they had returned home, Stefan and Nira sat together on the porch, watching the stars come out. The house was quiet, the children long since grown and living their own lives, though they visited often. "We did all right, did we not?" Stefan said. "We did better than all right," Nira replied. "We built something good." "We built something honest," Stefan said. "That is what matters." Nira leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the town around them. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A wagon rattled past on the main road. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of late summer flowers. "You ever think about that day at Waystone?" Stefan asked. "When you returned my purse?" "All the time," Nira said. "It was the day my life started. Before that, I was just existing. After that, I was living." "I think about it too," Stefan said. "I think about how close I came to just riding away, to never meeting you. It terrifies me how easily I could have missed this." "But you did not," Nira said. "You came back. You looked for your purse and you found me instead." "Best thing I ever found," Stefan said. Nira smiled and kissed him, a soft, lingering kiss that spoke of 20 years of love and partnership. When they pulled apart, her eyes were shining. "Best thing I ever returned," she said. They sat together on the porch until the stars were bright overhead, content in the life they had built and the love they had nurtured. It had started with a lost purse and a shared meal, with honesty and trust and a willingness to see beyond the surface. It had grown into something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. Inside the house, the fire burned low in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The rooms were filled with the evidence of their life together: Lyra's childhood drawings framed on the walls, Evan's first riding trophy on the mantel, photographs of family gatherings and celebrations. Every corner held a memory, every object a story. Stefan and Nira finally went inside as the night grew late, locking the door behind them and banking the fire. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving with the ease of long familiarity. As they settled into bed, Nira curled against Stefan's side, her head on his chest. "I love you," she murmured, already half asleep. "I love you too," Stefan replied, wrapping his arms around her. He lay awake for a while longer, listening to Nira's steady breathing and feeling the warmth of her body against his. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, about the choices they had made and the life they had created. It had not always been easy. There had been struggles and setbacks, moments of doubt and fear, but they had faced everything together, and that had made all the difference. Stefan thought about the young man he had been, the courier who had lived out of saddlebags and never stayed anywhere long enough to call it home. He thought about the frightened orc girl who had returned his purse, hungry and alone but determined to do the right thing. Those two people had found each other in a muddy crossroads on an ordinary day, and from that meeting everything else had flowed. It was a simple story, really. A lost purse, a shared meal, a slow building of trust. But simple stories could change lives, and this one had changed theirs completely. Stefan closed his eyes and let sleep take him, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more of the same: work and family, community and purpose, love and partnership. It was a good life, an honest life, and he was grateful for every moment of it. In the morning, he and Nira would wake and start another day. They would have breakfast together, maybe walk to the counting house to check on things, perhaps visit Lyra or take lunch with Evan. The rhythms of their life would continue, steady and sure, built on the foundation they had laid so many years ago. And if someone asked them how they had done it, how they had built such a successful partnership and such a loving family, the answer would be simple. It started with honesty. It grew through trust, and it endured because they chose each other every single day, no matter what. That was the story of Stefan Vance and Nira Hale, the human courier and the orc girl who returned his purse. It was a story about second chances and seeing people for who they truly were. It was a story about the power of small choices and the weight of integrity. But most of all, it was a love story, and like all the best love stories, it had a happy ending.